Have you ever stopped to think about the labels we use every day? We're constantly describing the world around us, but are those labels the whole story? Let's get into the huge difference between just seeing something on the surface and actually knowing what's going on underneath. All right, let's dive in.
So think about a phrase you've probably said or heard a million times. He avoids conflict, right? It's a neat little summary of how someone behaves. But does it tell us why? Nope, it's just a description. It's not an explanation at all. And we do the exact same thing with groups, not just people. You hear, this institution is dysfunctional. I mean, that's a powerful label, right? But what does it really mean? It's more of a judgment than a diagnosis. It tells us something's broken, but it gives us zero clues about what's actually causing the problem.
And then we scale it up even bigger, to society as a whole. You can't turn on the news without hearing, our society is polarized. It's everywhere, and it feels so definitive, like it's a complete explanation. But is it? Or is it just another label for the symptoms, not the underlying disease?
So that's the big question, isn't it? Do these statements, do they truly explain anything? Because when you look at them, they're all just descriptions of what we can see. They're like headlines, they're punchy, they grab our attention, but they are not the full story. To really get what's going on, we have to look deeper.
So, right there, that's the world of what we're calling description. It's the world of labels, of summaries. It's everything we see right on the surface. But, and this is the key, to truly understand something, you have to go deeper. And this brings us to this really fundamental split in how we can know things. On one hand, you've got description, that's the surface level stuff, what's visible to everyone. But on the other hand, you have something totally different, architecture. Think of it as the hidden structure, the machinery underneath that's actually creating everything we see. Okay, so what is this architecture? The best way to think about it is like the blueprint for a system. It's the set of rules, the relationships between the parts that totally determine how that system is going to behave. It's the cause, not the effect. Now, to get a little more formal, architecture is the underlying system of variables that govern how things, well, think and behave. And these variables aren't just fuzzy ideas. They're things like topology, which is just how the different parts of a system are wired together, or load, how much stress is on that system, and thresholds, basically the tipping points where everything changes. These aren't just concepts, they are real, measurable forces that we can use to understand and even predict what's going to happen next. All right, to really nail this down, let's break down 6 key differences between description and architecture. This is where it gets really clear. Okay, difference number 1, focus. Description is all about the what happened. Architecture, though, is all about the why. What were the mechanisms that made this happen? It's literally the difference between being a reporter just stating the facts and being a detective figuring out the case. Here's a perfect example of a descriptive statement. You've probably heard this in a meeting. The team keeps miscommunicating. Okay, great. We've put a name on the problem, but have we explained it? Not even close. But now, look at the architectural view. The miscommunication, that's just a symptom. The real problem, the architectural problem, is something like gradient conflict, where different parts of the team are pulling in opposite directions, and field instability, where the actual channels for communication are breaking down. See? When you look at it this way, you realize that just telling everyone to communicate better is like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. It's never going to work.
Number 2 is scope. With description, you can come up with a literally infinite list of labels for behavior. Anxious, insecure, rigid, unmotivated. The list goes on forever. But with architecture, we can explain all of those different behaviors with just a handful of core variables, like load, topology, and coherence. It's all about finding the simple, powerful rules that create all that complex behavior. Okay, third is nature. And this one's huge. Descriptions are fundamentally subjective, right? What one person sees as assertive, someone else calls aggressive. It all depends on your perspective. But architecture, it's mechanistic, it's invariant. A system's load either exceeds its capacity or it doesn't. A structure either breaks or it holds. There's no opinion about it. And this brings us to number 4, power. This is where architecture really starts to pull away. Description is fantastic at looking backwards, at naming patterns that have already happened. But architecture can look forward. It can predict what's going to happen next. It's the difference between just reading the weather report and being the meteorologist who actually makes the forecast.
So, number 5, measurement. And this really gets to the core of why architecture is so powerful. Description relies on interpretations, stories, labels, correlations.
Architecture, on the other hand, relies on hard data, load values, coherence ranges, distances to a threshold. You can't really measure a story, but you can absolutely measure a structure.
And finally, number 6, timing. Description is always post hoc. It's reactive. It can only kick in after a behavior has already appeared. But architecture is a priori. It's proactive. It exists and constrains what can happen long before any behavior ever occurs. It's the difference between cleaning up a huge mess and preventing it from ever happening in the first place.
So, okay, why does any of this matter? Why is this distinction so important? Well, because shifting your perspective from description to architecture isn't just some academic game. It fundamentally changes what's possible.
Let's circle back to that example of the person who shuts down under pressure. Description just slaps a label on it. But architecture? Architecture lets us build a model of that person's internal system. We can actually see how the parts are connected, how much stress the system can take, and exactly where the breaking points are. And once you have that model, you can figure out how to make changes to strengthen the system to make it more resilient. It's a difference between just being a spectator watching from the sidelines and being an engineer who can actually fix the machine.
And this is where it gets really, really mind-blowing. Think about this. You can't scale a story, but you can absolutely scale a system. You can't build a self-driving car by telling it stories about how to drive, right? You have to build a system with a clear, predictable architecture. And the same thing is true for creating artificial intelligence. You can't just feed a machine a bunch of descriptive labels and hope it becomes smart. You have to build a system with a well-defined architecture that can actually learn and adapt on its own.
So let's just sum it all up. This is the bottom line. Does description explain anything? No. Architecture? Yes. Does description predict? Can it scale? Can it help you change things? No, no, and no. Architecture does all of that. See, description just names what happened. Architecture explains why it had to happen that way.
In the end, it really all comes down to this. Description tells us a story about reality. Architecture reveals the actual causal forces that shape that reality. One is like a commentary. The other is the operating system itself. So the question to leave you with is, which one do you want to understand?